Hi everyone, welcome back to Novel Idea. My name is Dia. Today we are going to wrap up December 2024. I had 21 books that I read, so buckle your seatbelts. It's going to be a little bit longer today. All right, we better get started because I don't want to take too long. The ones that I enjoyed less, I'm going to try to not harp on because there are a couple of books that I really enjoyed and I want to tell you about them. But I don't want to take too long to explain these books in the video. So without further ado, let's jump in. The Ghosts of Greenglass House, and this is by Kate Milford. It's book 2 of the Greenglass House series, and our protagonist is back, and I can't tell you too much about it. It is the second one in the series, but I will just say that many of the characters from the first book are here in the second. It is still dealing with some very kind of deep childhood kind of issues, and it's done really beautifully. I really enjoyed the story, and I thought that, you know, typical to middle grade, it has a great outcome at the end. Middle grade, one of the reasons why I like to read them is 9 times out of 10 it's a happy ending. Then I read Wild Girl, or The Wild Girl, by Kate Forsyth. This is the story of the Brothers Grimm writing their collection of fairy tales, and the one girl who kind of told them some of these fairy tales so that they could put them into their book. And it is Dorchen Wilde, and she has a real knack for telling the tales of her grandparents and her great-grandparents and the generations past, and preserving these by oration. And so she is very young at the beginning, and by the end of the book, she's in her maybe early 20s. And for the most part, I thought this was a well-told story. However, because it is about Dorchen and her family, and it was not a good family situation, it was hard, and it wasn't the kind of book that I wanted for December and leading up to celebrating. We also lost my mother-in-law, one of my mother-in-laws. I had two, because James's real mom and his stepmom. We lost his real mom at the beginning of December. I then had a friend that called with some hard news, and then I heard some hard news from more family. It was just a very rough December, and the new year started off hard as well with another friend's passing. And so I guess I have reached the age where it's a lot of news is just going to be really difficult. But reading this book on top of that did not make it any more fun. And so I was not very pleased with Wild Girl. I think I might have been if I would have read it at a different time. Lud-in-the-Mist, and this is by Hope Mirlees, and I would say that this was like written in the 1920s. It's one of the first fantasy examples that we have, where that's all it is a fantasy story. And it is about two different civilizations or societies, communities, races, and that is fairies and humans. And the way that they interact, it's about family, it's about addiction, it's about forgiveness. And for the most part, I really enjoyed it. However, I will say that it has a slow kind of beginning to it, not exactly sure where it's going, what it's doing, and then it finally kind of gets there, but I never felt invested in the characters. I didn't really care what was happening on page. I think it's well written. I think it's a beautiful writing style, but I don't think that it is much more than that. Yeah, that's all I'll say about that one. A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. I reread this pretty much every year, and which you'll know if you've seen the last few videos about this month of the year, and from years past, I mean. And it never quite feels like the Christmas season has begun until I read The Christmas Carol. And so I started it at the beginning of December. It was done in the first few days. I just love this story, and I love the continued impact that it has had on society and on the season itself. And I love its message. So, A Christmas Carol. Then I read Miserere, and this was a suggestion that I got off of Talking Story. They were having like a town hall meeting, and John does this every now and then, where he just kind of lets some of his hey, it's enough of that. He just lets some of his patrons or commenters, I'm not sure which, kind of make a video where they are recommending a book that they have been reading lately. And this was one of them. So Miserere by Theresa Frohock is basically a story about the struggle between heaven and hell. And I wouldn't say that it is strictly a Christian, because it involves many different kinds of religions and beliefs within it, but that's basically what it is. And it has a beautiful kind of side story about forgiveness and second chances. It has a beautiful side story about found family and trust and faith. But it was just a meh kind of read for me. Now, I do understand that Frohock has released a kind of second edition of this where she's made some changes, but I read the original because I think the second edition or the revised edition is coming out this month, and so it wasn't available for me to pick up. Then I read The Quiet Little Woman by Louisa May Alcott. This is the story of an orphan who dreams of being in a family, being loved fully for who she is, not for what she can do, not because, she has anything more to give, but just being accepted and loved. And as a result of that, she makes some friends, and the family that she is placed into, she's treated very much like a servant, and which she is. She wasn't adopted into this family. And yet when they go off for a night for Christmas Eve at a relative's house, that relative says some things and kind of makes some things clear to the family that show them the error of their ways. And they return, and everything is sunshine and rainbows. And I think this is a very sweet story. I do think that Louisa May Alcott, in her short works, tends to, she has a lesson that she wants you to learn. She has a point that she wants to make, and she pretty much hammers you over the head with it. And that's what this felt like to me. It didn't feel as easy or as real as some of her longer works, when she has more time to develop those characters and storylines. So that was that one. Then I read Box of Delights by John Masefield. I think it's Masefield. I've heard it pronounced a different way, but I can't remember what that is, and the way that it looks to me is Masefield, so I'm going to say Masefield. And I read this with Celeste from A Reader's Almanac, and neither one of us quite think we got it. It is written very strangely. I would say almost stream of consciousness, and then like choppy after. So it'll be stream of consciousness, and then something will happen and everything stops, and then it goes in a different direction, and it just didn't feel cohesive. It didn't feel like this story that was, unfolding so much as it felt like an origami is what it felt like. So it felt like things were folding in on each other, and you had to figure out what angle the author was trying to come at it from. And there's a repeating line that I understand what the author was trying to do with it, because I've read other books with something similar happening, but I just didn't get the point of this book at all. Like, I didn't see character growth. I didn't feel connected to the characters. I didn't see any real reason why he was singled out over someone else. I didn't understand why it was so important at this time of year that the story was taking place for these things to be happening. It was just very, very odd. I did find out afterward that it is the second book in a duology, and I think the first one is called The Magic Folk. But maybe I would have gotten it better if I would have read that first, but I wasn't told that it was a duology. I didn't find that out until I was reading some author's notes. We'll move on. The next one was The Nutcracker and the Mouse King by E.T.A. Hoffman. Everybody pretty much knows the story of the Nutcracker. I will just say that Dumas, Alexander Dumas, also has a version of this, and his version is more well known and is what the ballet is based on. And E.T.A. Hoffman's version had some interactions with Maria's family that are not in the Dumas version and are also not in the ballet. And I didn't like them. I didn't like the disbelief of the family about what she was seeing or feeling, and dismissive almost. And so I just didn't care for those aspects of E.T.A. Hoffman's story. So I like Dumas' version better than the original by E.T.A. Hoffman. Then I was watching Morgan Long's Vlogmas videos, and she talked about A Week in Winter by Maeve Binchy. And she just mentioned how much she had just really loved it. And so I picked it up. And it is a multi-POV, sort of jumping around in a timeline. Strangers all come together. Somehow they're connected kind of thing. And I enjoyed it. I thought that it was a nice story. Very cozy at this time of year, especially. I read Save Me the Plums by Ruth Riechl. This is a nonfiction. This is Ruth's memoir about her time with Gourmet magazine and kind of what led up to that, what it was like to be there, and then the lessons that she learned about what's important in life and what she wishes she may have done a little bit differently. And it's beautiful. I pretty much read it in one sitting. It's not a long book. I'm looking forward to reading more by her. And was it life-changing? No. I didn't have a lot of nonfiction this year that I thought was amazing. So this one was very, very good. I read a collection of short stories, basically, and several of them were ones that I had read already, and so didn't need to reread. Gift to the Magi, A Quiet Little Woman, Cricket on the Hearth, some of these. So I read the ones in there that I had not read before, and I would say it was fine, but what I really loved was at the end of the collection, there were some Christmas carols and little stories about the writers of those carols. And that is what I really enjoyed about it. And I did really end up liking it as a result of that. Then Tiffany from Beautiful Minutia and I finished Kristin Lavransdatter by Sigrid Undset. And we had been reading it for October, November, and December. It is 3 different books: The Bridal Wreath, Mistress of Hussaby, and The Cross, bound up as Kristin Lavransdatter. And we follow Kristin from the time she's about 5 or 6 years old all the way up until her death. It is epic. It is sweeping. It is hard. It's not very pleasant to read sometimes. Beautiful, beautiful writing, and very raw and real and human. And I was surprised so many times throughout this book. I think that my edition is like 1,300 pages, thereabouts, maybe, give or take a couple. It does have sexual stuff in it, and I didn't really want to read that. The realness, that's not even a good word for it. The visceralness of the book is just so powerful. And it's a struggle of what we know to do versus what we do, and the consequences of those actions and the consequences of those choices that we make. And I just loved it. I did not want it to end by the end of the book. I just wanted more. I didn't want to stop reading. So, Kristin Lavransdatter, Humiliated and Insulted. This is by Fyodor Dostoevsky. I read this with Courtney from Courtney Reads, and it was a follow-up to reading The Old Curiosity Shop by Charles Dickens in November. And Dostoevsky was influenced by Dickens' Old Curiosity Shop when he wrote Humiliated and Insulted. And it's one of his earlier works. And I would say that I could see little glimpses of some things that maybe Dostoevsky took from Dickens. But it is its own story. And it is very Dostoevsky. I think Courtney made the comment one time that the characters feel almost British or the translation maybe of what we were reading felt British in the way that it was translated. It possibly could have felt that way in the original, but the translation that we were reading felt like the characters were a little British rather than Russian. That's about my only critique. It has some hard subjects that it deals with, per usual with Dostoevsky. It feels very much like one of his stories in dealing with the poor, dealing with the classes, dealing with uprightness versus the decrepitness of society. Not a new favorite, Dostoevsky, but it was still wonderful, and I really enjoyed it. So glad that I read it. Gifts of the Christchild and Other Stories by George MacDonald. I have read much of George MacDonald's works. I had never read Gift of the Christchild or Gifts of the Christchild, so I wanted to read that one. And I did enjoy it, but I think I need to spend some time like researching and digging a little deeper and rereading, because there were just some things that happened per usual in his fairy tales and fantastical stories that I just didn't understand. And so I want to understand. So I think I'm going to reread it at some point and also do a little bit of digging. Amazing Grace by Eric Metaxas. This is the story of William Wilberforce, who was in the, what's it called? Starts with a P. British Parliament. He was in Parliament, and he was intricate in getting slavery abolished in Britain. It's the story of his whole life and how he was raised to believe certain things, and his period of kind of walking away from that, but never really walking away. When he was voted into Parliament, the unwavering resolve that he had to see slavery done away with in every way, from shipping of slaves to buying of slaves to holding slaves to all of that on Britain itself, but also in the colonies. And it wasn't until his death that he saw it, or just before his death, that it actually came about. And he went into Parliament when he was 20 years old, hoping to see a dream come to pass. I'll tell you, my tea today is Yogi Chai Rooibos, and I'm kind of on the fence about it, to be honest. I think it has stevia leaf in it, and I'm tasting it, and it's not the best, but I am going to ignore it and keep drinking it because my throat needs it. 21 books is a lot to talk about. All right, Winterhouse by Ben Guterson. This is the story of an orphan who is living with relatives who are not very kind. Imagine that. And she finds that she has a wealthy benefactor. She goes off to their big mansion for a holiday, and things change in her life as a result of this. And she's also very gifted with puzzles of all kinds and puts that to work while she is at Winterhouse. And it's a trilogy, I think, but I've only read the first one so far. I passed it along to my niece because I thought she would enjoy it, and she's already read it and she liked it too. My Advent read this year was Anne Voskamp's The Greatest Gift. I don't think that there was anything new, but some of the way that she phrased what she was talking about made me think about it in a new way. And I appreciated it so much. It was wonderful in that Advent season to prepare your heart and to ready yourself to just open up to what the season was all about. So I had been reading and finished Wind and Truth by Brandon Sanderson, book 5 in the Stormlight Archives. And this is going to be tough because I'm sure that there are so many people that really enjoyed this book. But number one, it could have used so much editing. It was way too long, way too long. And it felt like maybe the first 50 pages out of the first 500 pages really needed to be there, and then the last 500 pages. The humor never landed for me. I'm not a fan of the humor usually, so it didn't land for me in this book. I didn't expect it to. There's some character arcs that are probably going to be divisive. None of those things are why I didn't enjoy this book. Besides the length of it, there are some choices that Sanderson made that feel like he was trying to be culturally relevant and, you know, trying to show that he can be culturally relevant. But he's a huge author. And what I have loved about his books in the past is that he didn't need to do those things. And why does he need to do them now that he is a big name? If he's made his success, why bother putting the stuff in that he did? So that really perturbed me because it didn't need to be there, and it was. Things are over-explained sometimes. I don't love that. If you're reading book 5 of the Stormlight Archive, you should know. It was just not a fun read for me until close to the end. There were a couple of interludes in there that I really liked. The book is set out over a 10-day period of time. I like that format. I thought that was really neat. There is a new point of view that really kind of changes things, and I thought that was really clever. I enjoy reading this series, but this book is not going to be a favorite of the series. I was not satisfied with the ending. I thought it was fine. These first 5, if this is the finishing one, I just didn't love the way that it ended. There are some puzzle pieces that fall into place. That was really fun. just not happy with Wind and Truth. Definitely not a favorite of the year. And I was really hoping it would be. I finished Look Unto Me. I have been reading it all year long. It was Charles Spurgeon in little blips and touches, and 365 days, so it was a devotional throughout the year. Jim Ryman also added some scriptures and some thoughts. I could have done without that. I wanted just Spurgeon, and I would have loved it if it was more of Spurgeon. Give me a longer thought and not just this little, 10-sentence thought. Give me a page, give me a couple of pages, and let the thought start and go to fruition. But I'm really glad that I read it. Wonderful devotional throughout the year. I read So Late in the Day by Claire Keegan, little tiny book. Most of hers are, that I've read anyway. This is close to the bottom of the reads that I have done for her, of her. My favorite is Foster, and then Small Things Like These. This would probably be next, and then Antarctica, I think, is the other one. I didn't enjoy that one at all. So those are the 4 that I have read so far. And So Late in the Day is basically about a selfish man who self-destructs all the relationships that he has. That's it. That's all the book is watching him self-destruct. And we end with him in the Mully Grubs, with life still self-destructing around him. So also probably not a great read for the last week of the year. Then I read The Secret Countess by Eva Ibbotson, and it very much had almost like a Cinderella kind of vibe to it. Russian family, they have to flee because of the revolution. They flee to England. The person that they have sent ahead with their jewels disappears, and so they are left penniless. They have a sponsor in England that allows for her brother to go to school, and she, at a young age, I'm thinking that she's 18 maybe, and she goes to work as a maid, and it just kind of unfolds from there. I love Eva Ibbotson's writing. She never lets me down. It is a very sweet, very well told story, and like I said, a little bit Cinderella-ish, so you can imagine what happens. And it was my last read of the year, and I am so glad that it was. So, whew, are you worn out? I am. It's a long one. I hope that you all are having a wonderful beginning to your new year. Happy 2025, everyone. I hope that this is a year of blessing and a year of delight ahead of us. I will see you again in another video very soon. Please tell me down in the comments what you're enjoying most in your reading so far this year. Thanks for joining me, everyone. Bye.